The wind howled across the wide Montana plains, carrying with it the scent of dust, rain, and loneliness. The sun had long dipped below the jagged ridges of the western hills, leaving a violet haze over the horizon. In that fading light, a girl stumbled along the dirt road, barefoot, trembling, her dress torn and mud-stained. Her hair, once golden and soft, now clung to her cheeks in damp strands. Her name was Clara May, and she had been running for days, from a town that had turned its back on her, from men who saw her as nothing more than a stray to use or sell, and from the memories that had broken her heart long before she ever set foot on this lonely trail. She didn't know where she was headed, only that west meant distance, and distance meant safety. But her legs were failing her now. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, when she'd stolen a crust of bread from a passing wagon. Her vision blurred, every step felt heavier than the last. The cold night pressed down around her, cruel and endless. And just when she thought she couldn't go on, the faint glimmer of a lantern appeared ahead, flickering from a farmhouse at the edge of a sprawling ranch. For a moment, she hesitated. She'd learned what happened to girls who knocked on doors asking for kindness. But the sharp ache of hunger and exhaustion left her no choice. She limped toward the faint light until she reached a fence, its wooden post standing firm against the prairie wind. Beyond it stretched a quiet expanse of land, fences, barns, and horses shifting in the dark. A dog barked once from the porch, alert but not aggressive. Clara froze, clutching her torn shawl tighter. The door opened. A tall man stepped out, his figure outlined against the warm glow inside. He wore a weathered coat, his hat pulled low, and though his face was shadowed, his posture was unmistakably strong and watchful, the kind of stillness that belonged to someone used to long silences and hard work. Clara's voice cracked as she fell to her knees on the dirt path. "Please, please don't hurt me," she whispered, trembling so violently that her teeth chattered. I'll work. I can clean, cook, mend clothes. I just need a place, just one night." The man didn't move for a long moment. The wind lifted her hair, revealing the bruises along her neck, the raw scrapes on her palms. His jaw clenched slightly, and then he stepped down from the porch. The dog stopped barking, sensing something deeper than danger. The man walked slowly toward her, boots crunching softly on gravel. When he reached her, she flinched, covering her face with her hands. "Please," she sobbed, "I'll do anything, just don't send me back." The man didn't speak. Instead, he knelt down in front of her. His hands, rough and calloused, didn't touch her, they just hovered, hesitant, as if unsure how to bridge the distance between a wounded stranger and the fragile trust she'd lost somewhere along her journey. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, deep, and tired. "Come home." 2 words. No threat, no demand. Just that quiet command. Clara looked up through tear-streaked lashes, confused. What? Come home," he repeated softly. Then he stood and offered his hand. She stared at it for a long time before finally placing her trembling fingers in his palm. It was warm, steady. He led her toward the house, where the smell of wood smoke and stew lingered in the air. Inside, the flicker of firelight revealed more of him. Dark hair, lines of weariness around his eyes, and a faint sadness that never left his expression. His name, she would later learn, was Elias Turner, a rancher, a widower, and a father. The house was quiet except for the gentle crackle of the fire. A small wooden cradle sat in the corner, covered with a quilt. Inside, a baby slept, his tiny chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. Clara's heart clenched at the sight. Elias noticed the way her gaze lingered on the child and spoke again, still calm. "My boy," he said simply. "Name's Levi. His mama's gone." Clara swallowed hard, her throat tight with emotion. I can leave in the morning," she said softly. "I didn't mean to intrude." But Elias only shook his head. "You'll stay," he said. "You look half dead. Sit." He ladled soup into a bowl and set it before her. She hesitated again, not out of pride but fear, the fear of traps disguised as kindness. But his eyes didn't hold hunger or pity. Only a quiet, worn decency. Slowly, she ate. Every spoonful brought tears to her eyes. No one had fed her in weeks. When she finished, Elias said nothing, just pointed toward the spare room down the hall. That night, Clara lay awake staring at the ceiling, the blanket soft and warm around her. The house was filled with the faint sounds of the baby's breathing and the creak of floorboards as Elias moved quietly in the next room. She tried to understand him, the man who had said nothing but, "Come home." It was the gentlest command she'd ever been given. Days turned into weeks. Clara began helping around the ranch, though Elias never asked it of her. She washed dishes, fed the horses, mended Levi's tiny shirts. She found peace in the rhythm of work, the kind that didn't demand, only steadied. Elias remained distant but kind. He spoke little, his silence heavy yet oddly comforting. Sometimes she'd see him standing on the porch at dusk, watching the horizon with an expression that carried both grief and resolve. He'd lost his wife 2 winters ago, childbirth complications, the doctor too far, the snow too thick. Since then, he'd raised Levi alone, worked the ranch alone, lived alone. Until the night Clara stumbled onto his land. He didn't ask her past, and she didn't offer it. But silence has a way of revealing truths. One evening, as she rocked Levi to sleep by the fire, her sleeve slipped back, exposing the faded scar around her wrist. Elias saw it. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Later, he left a small bottle of healing balm on the kitchen table without a word. Clara began to trust him, not easily, not fully, but enough to breathe again. She started humming lullabies she remembered from her mother. Levi giggled when she made faces. The sound of laughter returned to the house for the first time in years. But the peace they built was fragile. One afternoon, as Clara hung laundry in the yard, 2 men rode up the dirt road. She froze, the color draining from her face. She recognized the taller one instantly, Hank Morris, the foreman from the farm she'd escaped. He'd once promised to protect her but had sold her instead when debts came calling. His smile now was cruel as ever. "Well, I'll be damned," he sneered, dismounting. Little Clara May, playing house with a rancher. Elias stepped out from the barn, wiping his hands on a cloth. His eyes were steady but cold. "You've got business here." "Yeah," Hank said, smirking. "That girl there's a runaway. Belongs to my boss. We just came to take her home." Clara backed away, shaking her head. "No. Please, no. I don't belong to anyone." Elias's stance shifted slightly, nothing showy, just the quiet readiness of a man who'd seen trouble before. "She's not yours," he said flatly. Hank laughed. "Not yet, maybe. But she owes us work. And I reckon we can settle it right now. Step aside, cowboy." Elias didn't move. The wind picked up, carrying the distant cry of a hawk. Silence stretched between them until Hank reached for Clara's arm. That was when Elias struck, quick, efficient, no wasted motion. He grabbed Hank by the collar and shoved him back so hard he stumbled into the dirt. The second man went for his gun, but Elias was faster, his revolver drawn in a heartbeat. "You'll ride out now," he said, voice like gravel. "And you won't come back." Something in his eyes, something cold and unbreakable, made the men retreat. They muttered curses, mounted their horses, and rode off in a cloud of dust. When they were gone, Clara sank to her knees, sobbing. Elias holstered his gun and knelt beside her. She tried to speak, to apologize, but he only shook his head. "You're safe," he said softly. "They won't touch you again." That night, as the storm rolled across the plains, Clara couldn't stop crying. She told him everything, about the orphanage, the farm, the years of being passed from hand to hand like a tool no one wanted to keep. Elias listened without interrupting, his hands clasped, eyes steady. When she finished, he didn't tell her she was strong or brave. He just said, "You deserved better." And somehow, those 3 words healed more than any sermon or promise ever could. The months that followed changed them both. Clara became part of the ranch, its rhythm, its heart. She'd rise before dawn, cook breakfast, laugh softly as Levi toddled after her. Elias began to speak more, not much, but enough for her to learn the sound of his laugh, the warmth in his low voice when he said her name. One spring morning, she found him fixing the fence near the pasture. She brought him coffee, shyly offering it with both hands. Their fingers brushed, and for a moment, neither moved. His eyes met hers, full of something deep and wordless. But he stepped back first, respecting a line he never wanted to cross without her trust. By late summer, the ranch was thriving again. The wheat swayed golden under the sun, calves grew strong, and the evenings carried the smell of rain and wildflowers. Clara had learned to smile again, but peace never stays long on the frontier. One night, fire lit the horizon. The barn was ablaze. Elias ran out with a bucket in each hand, shouting orders. Clara grabbed Levi and fled outside, screaming his name. But in the chaos, she saw what caused it: Hank Morris again, drunk and vengeful, setting fire to what he couldn't claim. Elias fought him in the smoke, fists and fury. Hank drew his knife. The blade flashed once. When the fire died, the barn was gone, and Hank lay unconscious in the dirt, but Elias was bleeding badly from his side. Clara fell beside him, pressing her hands against the wound. "Stay with me," she cried. "Please, don't you dare leave." He looked up at her, eyes soft despite the pain. "Told you once," he murmured, voice fading, "you were home." Tears fell onto his shirt. "You are my home," she whispered. Elias survived, but barely. For weeks, Clara cared for him day and night, never leaving his side. She sang to Levi and to him, her voice raw with love and fear. When he finally opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was her asleep in the chair beside his bed, his hand still in hers. Time passed. The scars healed, both his and hers. The fire rebuilt something between them that neither words nor silence could name. One morning, as the dawn light poured through the window, Elias rose from the table and stood before her. He didn't kneel, didn't make speeches. Just looked at her the way a man looks when he's certain. "Clara," he said quietly, "stay. Not because you owe me. Not because you're running. Just, stay." She smiled through tears. "I'm not running anymore." And she didn't. Years later, people in town spoke of the rancher who never raised his voice but always kept his word, and the woman who came from nowhere yet built a life worth keeping. They said their home was the warmest for miles, the one with laughter, light, and the smell of bread always in the air. On quiet nights when the wind whispered through the pines, Clara would hold Elias's hand on the porch. Levi grown tall beside them. And remember the night she begged for mercy. The night he said only two words that changed everything: "Come home."